By 1943, the Axis powers were beginning to falter and the Allies were gaining momentum. Soviet victories on the Eastern Front combined with the invasion of North Africa by the Americans and British overextended the Axis armies. However, Germany was still in control of much of the European continent, including France. It would take the combined efforts of American and European forces to recapture the continent. The collaboration of US and European armed forces during the Normandy invasion led to the liberation of France and was the most significant turning point leading to Hitler's defeat in World War II.
Franklin D. Roosevelt, President of the United States from 1933 to 1945, appointed Eisenhower as the commander of the Allied forces in the invasion upon the German-occupied France.
Winston Churchill, Prime Minister of England from 1940 to 1945, took office after Prime Minister Chamberlain. Churchill led Great Britain during the Normandy invasion and through the end of the Second World War.
Joseph Stalin was the leader of the Soviets during World War II. Stalin encouraged his Atlantic comrades, the United States and Great Britain, to aggressively advance upon the Western Front in order to lessen the German pressure upon Russia to the east.
Frederick E. Morgan was a British Army officer. In March of 1943, Morgan was designated as Chief of Staff to the Supreme Allied Commander, or COSAC, of the invasion of France. Morgan began the initial planning for the invasion of France, codenamed Operation Overlord.
Dwight D. Eisenhower was a five-star general and commander of Operation Torch in North Africa. In December of 1943, he was appointed as Supreme Allied Commander of Operation Overlord. From this point on, he began the revision of Morgan's initial battle plan.
Bernard Montgomery was a British Army officer who commanded the ground troops throughout the Battle of Normandy. He was a key figure in the planning and preparation of Operation Overlord.
Trafford Leigh-Mallory was a British Air Force commander who fought in World War I and had considerable success during the Battle of Britain. This success led him to his appointment of Allied Air Commander during D-Day.
Bertram Ramsay was the Allied admiral during World War II. He was a key leader in the amphibious attacks of Normandy.
George S. Patton was an American Army general who led the 1st U.S. Army Group during the efforts of Operation Fortitude. Beginning in early August of 1944, Patton led a successful infantry and tank campaign across France, clearing a path free of Nazi interference.
Within Paris, Charles de Gaulle led efforts and rebellions against the German occupation, helping to rid Paris of Nazi oppression.
The Trident Conference of May in 1943 was a meeting at the White House between Great Britain and the U.S. One of the topics discussed was the importance of liberating the European continent from German occupation. During the 14 days, American and European commanders agreed upon certain invasion plans and priorities, including the preparation for a cross-channel invasion of France in the spring of 1944. However, the British leaders favored a more balanced approach of keeping the more divisions in the Mediterranean. Despite the tense disagreement, American and British leaders were able to find common ground. They agreed to continue operations near Italy while sending divisions from the Mediterranean to further strengthen Operation Overlord.
In August of 1943, the US, Canada, and Great Britain met in Quebec to discuss military strategies. This meeting came to be known as the Quadrant Conference. COSAC General Frederick Morgan proposed his plan for the invasion of France on or around May 1, 1944. Morgan's outline was tentatively agreed upon by American and British leaders. Although the Supreme Allied Commander for the invasion had not yet been appointed, Roosevelt and Churchill agreed that an American should be designated. At this point in the planning of the invasion of France, Churchill still favored an invasion from the Mediterranean. This plan would cause heated debates between American and British leaders in the coming meetings.
Just after the conclusion of the first session of Cairo conferences, Stalin, Churchill, and Roosevelt met in Tehran, the capital of Iran, from November 28 through December 1, 1943. The main purpose of the conference was to discuss the strategy on the Western Front. On the first day of discussion, President Roosevelt and Prime Minister Churchill debated invasion strategies. President Roosevelt and U.S. Army Chief of Staff General Marshall supported a cross-channel invasion coordinated with an invasion of southern France known as Operation Anne. Churchill, on the other hand, supported the continuation of operations in the Mediterranean that could delay Operation Overlord. Stalin supported the Americans' plan of Operation Overlord in Anvil. After the final meeting in Tehran on December 1st, American and British leaders returned to Cairo for another round of meetings. There, the cancellation of Operation Buccaneer, a planned amphibious assault, allocated additional landing crafts for the Normandy invasion. Also, President Roosevelt appointed Dwight D. Eisenhower as the Supreme Allied Commander of Operation Overlord on December 5th.
After his appointment as the Supreme Allied Commander, Dwight Eisenhower oversaw preparations for D-Day. With the advice of Bernard Montgomery, Eisenhower worked to strengthen the forces for Operation Overlord by requesting additional divisions. This would increase the number of divisions for the initial invasion from 3 to 5. The additional divisions would allow Eisenhower to expand the invasion to the Orne River. However, a shortage of landing crafts initially prevented the expansion. After the recommendation by Bernard Montgomery, Eisenhower postponed Operation Overlord for 30 days in order to allow more landing crafts to arrive. Eisenhower also postponed Operation Anvil indefinitely to ensure that sufficient troops be allocated for the Normandy invasion.
The invasion plan called for 2 American paratrooper divisions and 1 British paratrooper division to land behind the German defenses in the early morning. The British divisions were responsible for taking the Pegasus Bridge across the Orne River and destroying the German battery covering the Sword Beach. Finally, 2 American divisions were set to attack 2 beaches, codenamed Utah and Omaha. 2 British divisions had orders to attack 2 beaches codenamed Sword and Gold, and a Canadian division was set to attack 1 beach codenamed Juno. The infantry forces were to be supported by over 5,000 fighter planes.
The double-cross system was used to convert German agents to double agents for the Allied forces. These double agents were used to misinform German intelligence. Although Operation Fortitude attempted to present Germany with numerous possible invasion locations, including the Balkans, deception teams primarily focused on Norway, known as Fortitude North, and Pas-de-Calais, known as Fortitude South. Norway was the location of Hitler's U-boat bases, making it a prime location for invasion. To convince Germany that the Allies had the resources available to invade Norway, the American and British movie industries were employed to create fake divisions and landing crafts which were sent to Scotland. Also, radio messages were sent out that called for the movement of massive amounts of wartime goods to Scotland. These broadcasts were easily intercepted and decoded by the Germans, who believed them to be completely factual. Fortitude North was a tremendous success. By the spring of 1944, Hitler had transported 13 divisions to Norway. On June 4, 1944, Eisenhower met with Montgomery, Lee-Mallory, Tedder, and Ramsey. The following day's weather forecast did not seem to support any feasible air support option, a key variable in the invasion. Uneasy without air support, Eisenhower was forced to postpone for 24 hours. The Allies were able to achieve victories at all 5 beaches with only 2,500 casualties sustained. In a letter, Lee-Mallory reconciled with Eisenhower on their disagreement over when to commence the invasion. At noon, a messenger brought a note from Lee-Mallory. He said that it was sometimes difficult to admit that one was wrong, but he had never had a greater pleasure in doing so than on this occasion. He congratulated Eisenhower on the wisdom of his command decision in sending the airborne troops in, and apologized for having added to the Supreme Commander's worries.
Charles de Gaulle led the Free French Army of Liberation with reinforcements from General Patton's tank army, leading to the German surrender in August of 44. The Free French Army of Liberation was composed of scattered French military officers and soldiers who answered the BBC broadcast, where de Gaulle called for action against the Germans. Because of the efforts of the combined Allied troops, generals, and commanders, The Germans were expelled from France, and World War II ended in a Nazi defeat and continuation of liberty as we know it.